David, go ahead.
So how do you sort of go ahead and operating a program right now? What does that sort of look like for you?
You know, typically for the sport of baseball, you end in the summer and the kids immediately go out and play summer ball. The coaches immediately go out and recruit summer baseball for high school athletes. So for now, we actually are able to kind of corral or wrap up the season in a fashion we normally can't. So obviously we'd rather be playing, but it is nice to have time to talk with your coaches in person about what are some things that went well, what are some things we do differently, and then of course go up and down the roster and, you know, kind of grade each guy out like a professor would so we can relay that to our players. And, you know, I don't know if this is a question that would follow with that topic, but other coaches have already had their exit meetings and they're probably ahead of where we're at right now with our deal. So there's some things to do, but until we have all the answers, we can only go so far because we certainly don't have all the answers because our sport with 11.7, holy cow.
Mike, then Trey?
Yeah, the eligibility question, how complicated is that with baseball, with the scholarship limits, percentages, the number of guys you can even have on scholarship?
Yeah, it's every year we are dealing with what maybe other sports, and I'm not going to pretend to know what other people are doing or what they might have to do, but who's coming, who's going, the draft, what about replacing this guy, things like that. We have to deal with it every year, but now it's going to be that on steroids, if that's the right term in our sport. Not that we're doing anything illegal with our supplements, but you know, it's just going to complicate the issue even more of what seniors are going to do and you know, who all will come back. So you know, if we had all the answers, we could move forward and have a better idea of this is our next move or this is what our team will look like next year. But I've had to cut off conversations with our younger, more energetic coaches because it almost is kind of a waste of breath right now to talk about that stuff.
Coach, can you walk through the process of, for you guys and you in particular, when you talk to the SEC this weekend, you're kind of finding out, okay, you know, we're no College World Series, that was first. Then there's hope to play, maybe we'll get the SEC tournament. And then that's kind of shot down. Your mindset over the last couple of days and how the players have handled it so far?
You know, they've taken it in stride. The first time we met, they almost were kind of delirious about the whole thing because our message at the time was the one that should have been relayed until March 30th, or at least until a certain date. We're taking a timeout. And I wasn't trying to be super coach or anything, but I was pointing out the fact that our team is kind of built to take advantage of a break in the action because we had Zach Daniels was only able to DH because he was sore. Garrett Crochet and Camden Sewell are starting pitchers, but they hadn't had time to build into that. So you could kind of see that this was actually a decent thing for us if we were going to pick back up with baseball. But one of the other comments I made is the world they live in now is so much different than mine with Twitter and social media. First of all, I wouldn't have this job if Twitter existed when I was their age, but that's another topic. But you were kind of seeing stuff unfold before the official announcement was there. So for our sport, we felt like we had a great team. You know, where the season would have took us, who knows? But we either would have won a national championship or for most teams, you lose and it's a sudden punch in the gut. You probably lose a close game that you thought you could have won, or things that ended abruptly and now all of a sudden guys are crying and that's it. For this deal, it's kind of been, this doesn't look good, this looks worse. And again, the media has kind of been one step ahead of the game. I woke up at 6 a.m. to pack my bags for South Carolina, was irresponsible, didn't pack the night before, and you got Charles Barkley and everyone else saying, student athletes, there's no way they're going to be doing this if the NBA's not doing this. And so it kind of unfolded slowly, at least from my personal perspective, and I think for our guys too.
Vince?
Can you talk about preparing your guys and communicating with your guys on what to do, obviously take care of themselves and be responsible, but also continue to work out on their own things like that? And how much of a benefit is it to have Coach Q to be able to kind of help them steer through that?
Well, now you can relay a lot of things, you know, via apps or emails and things like that, FaceTime. So our guys will get the guidance, but then it's up to them to put it into play. And one thing that the coaching staff made a comment about earlier today was, you're going to find out during this break who likes to work and who doesn't, because guys are going to go backwards if they don't put in the work. And some guys are going to leapfrog some guys because they do work passionately and, they start to develop more physically. And we always talk about freshman year to sophomore years where you see the biggest jump. Well, you might see either the biggest regression or the biggest jump out of guys who are going to make the most of their time. So, again, nowadays with just the nature of technology or how easy it is to communicate when you're not around somebody, our guys will get everything they need. But if they actually put it into action or not, it's going to be, based on that sole individual.
Brianna?
Yeah, in terms of, have you sat down with your staff and kind of mapped out like exactly what might take place, or are you just waiting kind of for the NCAA to rule all that stuff before you really have like a figuring out like who's going to draft, who's coming back?
Right. Well, you don't even know what the draft is going to, you could go as far as to, and I wasn't the first one to say this, but you could even go as far as to say, what if there's not a draft this year? I don't think you could rule anything out with what's going on in the real world, but there probably will be a draft, but there'll also almost certainly be a modification. So how does that affect our current roster? There's just so many unknowns. So if you want, just an inside look at what we've done for a couple days over there is facility. We've talked about it nonstop since we've gotten here. So can we use kind of a turn a negative into a positive, the old coach speak? Well, now it's getting to the point where, campus is, kind of becoming a place where no one's going to be. So there's only so much we can get done there as well. So other than sanitizing our place over there and talking about what we want to do when we do get back into action, it's really just kind of been about facility. And then, as I mentioned earlier, literally drawing up a report card for our guys so that we can relay that to them.
David?
Tell me, where are your guys right now? And they were in any difficulties getting home, and everybody going to stay here?
Yeah, I think for some guys it was immediately going home because they have the opportunity to do so. And then campus kind of came out with encouraging people to go home for obvious reasons. And now I think some guys, where maybe they wanted to hunker down in their apartment, they're kind of, the older guys that are juniors, they think they're adults, even though they're not completely, at least yet. And so, well, I got my place to live. I'm going to set up shop here and see how things go. You're starting to see some of those older guys now return home to Florida. And, even Matt Torino, who's from Canada, he's made his way back home to Toronto. Liam Spence is the one guy who was really unfortunate. His family came to watch him play, and they had to hustle back to Australia in order to make sure that there was no controversy getting back home. And I think they'll even be quarantined once they make it back home. So Liam is kind of the one guy that's left here, but even Liam was battling an injury that, again, it's way in the past now, but a small break in there could have benefited Liam because you guys may not have known this, but he wasn't practicing with us for the last week or so. He was only playing in games, battling a little bit of an injury. So, but he'll be here rehabbing and living in the good old U.S. for a while.
I know you said the draft kind of up in the air, but you did have several players on your roster who were hoping to use this season in their body of work to maybe catapult their stock in the upcoming draft. How do you kind of navigate them through this time where they don't have that body of work to show scouts?
It's funny, and I'm not speaking directly about our guys, just across the country, there's going to be some players that probably benefited from not playing more. And then I'll use an example such as Garrett Crochet. You don't want to overhype things, but people who saw what he was doing know that, the word was still getting out about what this kid was doing. Flipping 95 in there, pretty easy. First time in his life he's ever thrown a changeup. His body had really kind of started to become, what it has potential to be. So in my opinion, he's a player, and again, it's just my opinion, he's losing out because the more he was out there, the more, I hate to say it, the more his stock was going to rise or money that he could potentially make. But that's where, advisors and pro ball and all that stuff may come into play, as we get closer to the draft. And And then there's other guys who may have, at the very least, I think Zach Daniels proved that he was going to keep up what he was doing. I mean, his last game against East Tennessee State was incredible, but at least he got those 17 games in to show people how far he had come from freshman year to junior year. So there's a different tale for each individual. And, you'd like to think these scouts have been following these kids. Now it's such an exact science and the analytics to it. There'll be some mistakes made, because there's not as much information out there. But if the draft goes down the way, all of us would at least kind of predict somewhat, the guys will get what they deserve.
Finish up with Wes and Brent.
I know that, if you were able to kind of toss the coronavirus stuff out of it and just say that a bunch of these guys were going home and probably, even if they're going to workouts and doing the school stuff, electronically, they're going to have a lot more free time than they probably had in a while. You got to talk to them about making sure they, act responsibly with all that free time.
Sure. No, originally the comment was to our players, hey, maybe March 30th, maybe April 15th, and the guys that don't do their work will get exposed like they do over Christmas. We had two very distinct examples. I hate to admit it, but there's always a guy who doesn't do their work, and when they return in January, it could not be more obvious. And so I kind of created that parallel or made that analogy to our guys. But since all this has gone on, or since we've been away from each other for a few days, we haven't really communicated that. Like I said, it's a little too hard to go to step 7 or 8 until the parameters surrounding step 2 or 3 or wherever we're at. But part of it I think is a culture thing. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make the complete statement that I think we potentially could have made to make progress in our program. But I think one area we've made progress is the work ethic category, and hopefully that is now kind of innate in the guys that have been in our locker room, that it's a staple of ours to prepare and to work the right way.
Coach, I know you talk about steps, and you also said earlier some kind of mind-blowing thoughts of if there's extra eligibility, how you manage the number. As coaches, and I know you talk to colleges, how quickly do you guys need an answer on that to sort of figure that out for summer arrivals and for August arrivals? How quick do you guys need an answer on that step before you can move forward?
Sure. I can't speak for all other coaches, but my gut reaction to your question is there's no rush at all. But it's more sequential. You don't want to find out this, this, that, and the other last minute, and now high school kids are freaking out because, well, where's my playing time? Or you only get a certain amount of time between finding all the logistics out and the draft popping up. So I think more just proper sequence. But I think with how on hold everything is in the world, not just the baseball world, I don't think there's a rush to it. And so that could be, time well spent where there's some, a diplomatic approach to let's get to the best answers possible. And I don't think there's probably the best answers for the SEC, the Big Ten, other conferences to get everybody on the same page. I don't envy those people that got to figure that out. And what's nice is, guys like Coach Cohen and Ray Tanner are baseball coaches that are now ADs, and they'll represent our conference well. And they've even reached out to the coaches in the conference to, give us some feedback. And the ABCA has done that as well. So anyone that wants to speak their mind can, and you'd like to think all that information pooled together will get somewhat of a compromise out there, but no one's ever always going to be happy, no matter what topic it is.
Coach, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.